Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the work session for Monday, December the 7th, 2020. Berman, would you please call the roll?
Is Mr. D'Amelio logged on yet? Not yet. All right. Mr. Oliva.
Here.
Mr. McCluskey.
Here.
Mr. Siegel.
Here.
Mr. Lewis.
Here.
Mr. Quinn.
Here.
Dr. Hart.
Here.
Mr. Holmes will be here shortly. And Mr. Wexler.
Is here. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag.
To the flag,
of the
United States of America,
and to the republic for which it stands, one
one
nation,
nation,
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Hey, Bill, there's like a piercing sound. Oh, seems like it disappeared.
Okay. All right. First item is police crime report. I have Chief Viola give that.
Thank you, Commissioner. Can you hear me okay?
You can hear you fine.
I got Steve D'Amelio called me. Hold on 1 second.
There's the first crime of the evening.
Hey, Steve. Oh, you are, we're on the Zoom meeting, you know. Yeah, it did. Okay, all right. No.
Are there any other commissioner committee updates? Anybody wants to go forward now? Any updates?
He looks like he's off the phone now.
Okay. You're
Oh,
muted,
John, you muted yourself.
Okay, I'm good now. All right,
Go
sorry.
ahead. That's okay.
All right, the chief's report for November of 2020, 22 criminal arrests, 71 traffic citations, 4 non-traffic citations, 50 written warnings, 114 parking tickets, no robberies, had a burglary at the Park and Rec Building, 600 Glendale Road, Summit Gate entry over the weekend at 11/6, several open windows and a unlocked door. Nothing was taken from the building. 300 block of Valley Road reports they saw a black male standing by the side door of their house. The subject made a statement to the effect that the door was unlocked. He was looking for somebody, got on a bicycle and then drove away. She also reported that her car was entered in her driveway. She found it shortly thereafter. Unit block of West Eagle Road on 1120, the front glass door was broken out of Carl's Cards. K9 was deployed in the building. Nothing was reported missing. Motor vehicle theft, 1700 block of Josie Lane for a BMW taken from the driveway. The spare key was left inside the car. Township line U-Haul, a overdue rental, has not been returned. Is now listed as stolen. We had 23 attempts from vehicles. Unit block of Jacqueline Drive, 1700 block of Josie, Jacqueline Drive, Hal Lane, Jacqueline, Josie, Robinson, and continuing on Washington Avenue, Fairland Manor, South Manoa, Fairview, 21 Fairview, 100 block of Warrior Road, 100 block of South Eagle Road. On 11/19, they were believed committed by the same actor. Detective Goodman obtained a warrant for the suspect. He's a serial vehicle entering person, and he has been arrested. 1300 block of Westchester Pike, 2 Best Buy cars at $500 right-hand car was taken out of the rear seat of the vehicle. And then we have 4 bicycle thefts and 1 K9 usage. That's the report.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions for the Chief?
They were all unlocked cars, by the way.
It's amazing, isn't it? Okay. Any commissioner committee reports? No updates? Okay. All right, we'll move right along. So everybody sees the schedule. We have the budget meeting next week. So any proposed budget changes, discussion here? Anybody? Amy, is there any?
Bill?
Yes, go ahead, Larry.
Well, I'm just not signed in yet.
Go ahead and ask the question. I'll repeat it.
Oh, is Brian Barrett on the call?
Brian Barrett is on the call.
I want Brian, we talked at the budget meeting about the Caricon, lights at Caricon, and I wanted to know what the rec department's position was on it, and whether they just want to put it in line with other projects, or whether they want it to be a 2021 project.
Christina?
Brian, I don't know if you heard that, but.
Yeah, I
Larry's
did hear that.
Okay.
Yeah, I did hear the question. So the Haverford Township Little League, we met with them back in September, and they had asked about some different improvements at Caricon Little League Field, including lights. They did come to our November Park Board meeting and asked the Park Board for their support in that, and the Park Board did vote unanimously to support them as long as funding could be allocated. In the current capital fund, which I mailed a summary to the commissioners, there is no funding in there for that project. All the money that's still in the fund, we spent a little more than half of it at this point, is earmarked for other projects.
All right, thank you. Larry, did you understand that?
So is there a way to, maybe Larry has a follow-up question, then
Yeah.
I might have a follow-up question.
Larry, do you have a follow-up question to that, or?
Well, yeah, I just, sorry, I'm having trouble signing on. The question is whether we were going to add something to the 2021 budget. And there are, I have some concerns about Caricon jumping ahead in line, of any other field that is trying to get lights. And I just wanted to find out whether the Recreation Department had a schedule in mind, or whether they think we should do this project in 2021.
Well, again, the project was only brought to light in the last couple months, so there was no planning for lights at Caricon as part of this funding, the current round of funding. So there are a lot of other worthy projects, and I'm not saying Caricon is another worthy project, but there were other projects that were previously identified that we were considering as part of the next round of capital funding. But I think that we could find room in the next round of capital funding for this project, and I think it would be a worthy project.
So,
Andy,
my-
what's your
my-
question?
Yeah, so my question is, are we going to have, I assume we'll be floating some debt next year, or refinancing some debt to fund these projects for next year? Is that, whether Amy
Yes.
answered that, or?
Yes, that was the plan. The timing is going to depend largely on the library project, because that's the crux of what we anticipate borrowing is going to go to that library project. So I would assume the timing would be somehow dependent on that. We wouldn't want to borrow, of course, too early and incur that debt service without having a concrete plan in place to spend it. But that additional park money is anticipated to be part of a larger borrowing to occur sometime in 2021.
So you don't know whether that could be in May or July or October, you just don't know, right?
No, until we have a more concrete timeline on the library, I would suggest we hold off as long as we can, again, not to incur that debt service cost until we're ready to spend.
And Brian, what other parks in our system for baseball need lighting? My understanding is that everybody else has lighting, and Caricon is the only, and in fact, they're the only sanctioned Haverford Little League organization in the township, and yet they're the only ones without lights.
Okay, currently the only Little League in town that has a lit field is Brookline/Westgate baseball down at Genther Field. Hilltop uses the field down at the McDonald Field down at Warrior, and Vermont, but that there's lights on that field, but not for baseball. That's more for practicing soccer and football. So the only location besides the reserve that baseball can be played at night is at Genthert Field. Since the conversation came up at the commissioners meeting on the Haverford Township Little League, I have heard from Hilltop Little League that they would also like to be considered for lights both at McDonald Field and at Hilltop Field. And I do think lights would help us with our youth sports programming, both the Civic Association programming and the township programming. But there is not widespread lights around the township at this point.
What about the field there at the township building? That doesn't that have light?
Township building, we are opening up bids tomorrow for that project for Veterans Field. So that will be the next field that would be lit. And that would be lit for both, the plan is to light it for both football, baseball, and softball. So they would like that center part of the field of veterans. So at that point, we would have 2 fields that could be used for Little League Baseball in the evenings.
Well, I'm just wondering if the board would entertain the idea of maybe advancing this project forward in some way, whether it be fully funding the project or funding the materials and having Caricong Little League take a loan or take out debt for the installation of the project, or some combination to get the thing started, and maybe reimburse ourselves when we do float the bond at some point next year. So I'm just making that suggestion. I don't know how the rest of the board feels, but it seems to me that this is the only sanctioned Little League organization in the township. They're the only ones that can compete in the Little League World Series in Williamsport, because they are the only sanctioned Little League, and yet they've been out without a field. Now, the alternative might be to rent them lights next year to get them through 2021. I don't know whether we can do that as an alternative, just to because these are volunteers that obviously not only volunteer their time to coach, but they also are there to maintain the fields. So I think it's a lot to ask of them to also be out raising money as well. So I'm in favor of trying to find a way to try to help them in some way in the 2021 season.
I'm not opposed to helping them, but I think we face the same thing. I mean, Hilltop is a very big Babe Ruth program, has both
Has been to Williams.
Little League softball. If you're going to do it for one, you have to do it for everybody. And I think we should let the rec department, I would put it in for the following year when we borrow money.
I agree, Jerry. Having 3 township baseball fields lit at night, to me, seems sufficient. We don't want the kids, we don't want to change the entire organization of Little League to play at night in this township. I can tell you specifically, Hilltop Field, the neighbors are going to fight that tooth and nail. I think the fact that we have lights at Genthert, Veterans Field, and if we put them at Caricon, we've got left, center, and right covered in the township, and that they got to share. So it becomes a rec department item to have the various leagues schedule their night games at the various venues there if they want to play at night, to give the kids the opportunity to play under the lights. But to light every baseball field, if we have 3 good baseball fields lit in the township, that seems pretty significant to me for Little League. It says.
I'm sorry, Bill. Are you saying Caricon being one of them ultimately?
Yeah, it's on that side of the township. Veterans Field to me is the center of the township, and Genthert Field is the other side of the township. So if we had 3 lit venues like that for baseball, I think that would be sufficient for the township, and then just schedule, because the majority of their games are still going to be daytime. It's just, if you're going to have competition, they should be able to use the field specific and the correct, obviously, but to use that there, lighting every field seems excessive and kind of a waste.
I don't disagree with that, Bill. And I just, so if that's the consensus, I would maybe.
Well,
Well, can I
I
just-
throw it out. It's not a consensus, so.
Yeah, Bill,
I just,
go ahead.
go ahead, Jerry, if you can finish.
Okay, Bill, I don't disagree with you. I think, having been very involved in baseball for 25 years in the different organizations,
Yep.
I think, believe me, Caricon would need to agree to let other organizations play there, and that's going to be a big leap. If Brian can work that out, that's great. But
What's going to be the same with Genthard and the other?
I
and
understand. I
veterans,
mean,
yeah.
no, I'm, it's reasonable. I'm just talking about how the organizations tend to work. Everybody has their turf.
Yeah, baseball, I think, is worse than the 5 fire companies. It's, no, they're tougher on each other, John, trust me. So they don't work together at fires. But I mean, 3 fields in the township for Little League Baseball we'd be one of the leaders in the East Coast, I would think. That's a lot of lit fields. So
I guess my only concern here in all this is sort of like the time frame of this, right? So if we all agree this is a good idea, if we're waiting till the next bond and we're waiting till the library borrowing, my concern is if we don't do that till next fall, then the money's in the next year's budget, then maybe it doesn't get done in the spring, and we're talking, you're pushing it out a year or two. And I guess I just say that just based on, and it's not to criticize anybody, but we're still talking about half the money being spent for the latest borrowing. I mean, it's just, we as a government, that's sort of how it works, is we operate slow. So I would be more inclined to try to push it into somewhere into next year, I guess.
I mean, if we could do a piece of it, get the polls up at least with extra budget money, if we have any. This is a tough year with the COVID losses. So.
Yeah, I understand.
They've offered to. There are a couple of ways to approach it. One is for us to buy the equipment, and then for them to pay for the labor and installation of the lights through a loan that they were willing to take out. So that's one approach.
And maybe Brian and Amy can work that out then.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be opposed to even lighting Hilltop, quite frankly. I mean, I know maybe three's too many. I don't know, but if there's the demand for it and there's not public opposition in terms of neighbors coming out in opposition, I'd be inclined to support it. But if there's going to be, a lot of neighborhood opposition, then it's problematic.
Yeah, it's the front yard of about a dozen homes, so it'll be.
Okay. Well,
Well, I mean, at Caricon, there's not going to be neighbors at Caricon, right?
No, Hilltop would be
I don't have that issue, I don't think. Yeah. So.
Yeah, Caracon's out on its own, just like Genthard is too. Genthard doesn't have residences right on, shining in the windows, so that's a great place for lights.
Well, would it be all right if Brian and Amy work together with?
Yeah, no, I think if we can,
Caricon,
we can work something out, yeah.
Yeah. For next year, that'd be great.
And mediate the feuds between the organizations.
Brian's used to doing that.
Oh, yeah.
Soccer and polo field.
A lot of the old guard has passed on, so maybe it's getting easier. I don't know.
Okay. Well, thanks for your support, and hopefully Brian and Amy and folks from Caricon Little League can figure something out that gets the thing kick-started for next year rather than in 2022.
I hope so. Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
All right. Thanks, Andy. And all right, there's a bunch of other things on there. Any other comments on? We've got a full agenda, a lot of items, but a lot of approvals other than the budget. So the recreation department we've looked at, contracts for the police, multinodal. Nothing looks too controversial to me, but.
Mr. President?
Yeah, Mr. Siegel, go ahead.
Yeah, I just, I had requested, and I know it was provided to the board, but I want some clarification on the Vermont Road acquisition. I know part of it is oops. Sorry, a delivery. Okay. With that musical interlude. But his acquisition of the property. But then the plan is to construct the trail in that location, as well as the easement. And I'm trying to get a handle on the costs that were circulated so that I understand what the total cost of this projected is to be. So if Mr. Barrett could explain that, because I see numbers that total, $2 million, and I want to get a handle on what we are looking at for this project.
Do you want me to take that question, Bill?
Yeah,
Please.
Brian, go ahead.
Okay, so there was the commissioners decided they were going to try to acquire the property at 1744 Vermont Road. And the township applied for a DCED grant for that property, and it was an 70-30 match. So the township would have to provide 30% of the funding, and the grant would provide the other 70% of the funding. Township followed that up with a grant to DVRPC for a construction grant to take the existing Darby Creek Trail from the edge at Murray Place to Warrior Road. And that was an 80-20 match. And the idea was that we would use the funds from the sale of 599 to be the matches for those two projects. Now, separate from that, the township put in another grant, I think through PennDOT, for the reorganization or the reworking of the Vermont-Glendale intersection. And in that grant application, there was also a plan to bring the trail to that intersection from Murray Place. So from where it ends now. So I'm not sure that grant was put through by Pannoni, so I don't know a lot of the details on that grant. But those are the three things that the township has done. One of them relates to the intersection and the traffic issues, but also brought in a portion of the trail. The other two relate to the acquisition of 1744 Vermont and the grant to build the trail from where it ends in Murray Place to Warrior Road.
Okay, but what I'm trying to understand are the numbers.
Okay.
Because when I look at this and I see the totals, I see one column of the costs, then an extension of costs, and then funding with matches. But I really am looking for, assuming we get all the grants, what will this cost? And then assuming we don't get grants, what would it potentially cost to do this?
Okay. Well, for the purchase price, I think that.
Brian, Dave Pannoni's on here.
Okay.
He's got the construction. Dave, if you want to jump in.
I think, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
I'm off video, just I had a little trouble getting in today. So we had, if the board remembers, there were two thoughts about the trail, extending it from Murray Place to call it the parking lot, for lack of a better term, at the ball fields on Glendale Road, right by the township border. And initially, if we couldn't go through 17, let me make sure I get the address right. 1744.
That's correct.
Yep. Then the concept was to actually go to the other side of Darby Creek with footbridges, run along on the Marple side, and then come back. Then we also looked, and that was part of a study we did years ago with Tim was still here and Brian was here, and that was extending the trail from one end to all the way up to Haverford Reserve. Then we looked at the cost, the order of magnitude cost to extend the trail from Murray Place to the parking lot, assuming we could go through 1744, and we put that order of magnitude of about $800,000.
How long is the
So
trail?
the cost would be 800,000 plus the acquisition cost of the property?
Right.
And how much of that is potentially reimbursable grants?
That's harder to answer because there's multiple moving parts on the grants. The grant application for the property itself has a match of how much, Brian? How much do we say for that?
It was a 70-30.
70-30.
70-30 match.
All right. And then
The
we've got a
DVR
DVRPC grant application in.
And that was an 80-20 match.
And then, and Dan, it's the multimodal one at Glendale and Vermont. I don't have that in front of me, but we only put in a section of the trail to get us to Glendale and Vermont. We didn't put the part of any kind of a trail that would get us from the intersection to the Marple Springfield border. That's a tough, I can't give you, the best answer I give you is with no reimbursables. That's the order of magnitude money we're talking about. With no with no successful grants, that's the order of magnitude we're talking about. For every grant that we get, every grant we get, they're anywhere from a 20 to 30% match, right, Brian? That's probably a good way to say it.
That's correct.
So if we get grants, we're talking about spending 20 to 30 cents on the dollar. If we don't get the grants, then it goes up exponentially.
And is that based on the 800 and 300, not the figures in Brian's spreadsheet?
Yeah. Can I just?
I have Brian's spreadsheet.
Yeah. When we put the grant together for DVRPC, we figured that we could use pathways through Murray Place, existing pathways, sidewalks through Murray Place, and cut out about almost 1,000 feet of trail that would already be existing. So we would get to beyond, if you're familiar with the area, beyond to like the tennis court at Murray Place, and then take them along the roadway. So we felt like we could make some savings on the initial proposals that were in the Darby Creek Trail study when Pannoni put together the numbers for trail, as he said, from Warrior Road all the way up to Reserve. We felt like we could have some savings, both with what I was just saying and also the township doing some clearing of some of the property along Glendale and Vermont Road. So we felt like we could bring the $800,000 figure down around $400,000.
Plus the property acquisition.
Plus the property acquisition.
Okay. Because I'd really just like to see those numbers rather than this spreadsheet. So I know what we're looking at potentially committing in, township and capital funds and everything. It's a large expenditure. We've spent a ton of time debating other costs, and I want to know what I'm voting on. We normally have a better feel, and I just, these numbers blew me away from your spreadsheet.
Well, I can get both the grant applications and send them to you, Dan. The multimodal would be through Dave, but I have the DVRPC grant, the DCED grant. I can send them to you, which will have the breakdowns of those numbers we're talking about.
Okay, because a bottom line number is what I want to see or arrange.
Yeah, and you know what, Dan, I think maybe Brian and I could put our heads together and because there are multiple different potential matches. And I don't have his spreadsheets, but I could match up that with what we did at Vermont and Glendale and that multimodal. And Brian, so maybe we can boil it down and simplify it pretty quickly, I would think.
Yeah, okay.
I know that that might be the simplest thing to do.
Yeah, and I just sent you, Dave, Brian's spreadsheet, so you at least know what I'm looking at in the future. So that'll help, I hope.
Okay. Any other questions on that? Any other topics that anyone wants to bring up?
Bill, can you hear me?
There you go.
Yeah,
You got me?
we can hear you now. Yeah, just barely.
Okay. So I'm sorry I missed the beginning of the meeting. I had trouble getting in, but that's no fault of you, Dave. It's probably my lack of IT skill. Anyway, in relationship to the budget, I think you guys know how I feel about the volunteer firefighters, but I will refer this back to the chiefs and have them come forward.
Okay.
So I'll talk to the Bureau of Fire.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Jerry's been at every one of their meetings this year.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll give you a call too if you don't mind offline.
Sure.
Okay, any other questions on next week's agenda? Either on the budget, any of the questions on any of the ordinances, resolutions, or the contracts?
Just a general question on the police services. They get overtime. When we charge the business or organization, do we cover our expenses for the police?
Yes.
Okay.
Just to follow up on that, we probably will be proposing a slight increase in the fee schedule for 2021 with the new contract. We just want to make sure we are covering the costs going forward too. So we're working with Deputy Chief Hagan and Chief Iola to make sure those rates reflect that.
Great.
No other questions? Going once, twice? I believe then we should adjourn. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Night.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
All right, good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Night.